Hello, I'm Aaron Nightingale, owner of Nightingale LED Solutions and co-owner of the LED Costume Academy. I've been in the art of wearable electronics for over 10 years. Hopefully you've watched the first two videos of this series. Especially if you're just starting out, I suggest you go back and watch them first. It'll explain all the tools that I use for soldering and what tip type and care for soldering tips before applying to your project. This video will focus on different types of solder to help you choose what's best for you and your project. Again, let me just pause to remind you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. First, let's discuss what solder is. Solder is using the alloys silver, Ag, tin, Sn, copper, Cu, and antimony, Sb, applied to and fusing the joint between two metals to bond them without melting the metal itself. These alloys all have different melting points ranging from 194 to 752 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 to 400 degrees Celsius. For example, a solder of 50% tin and 50% lead has a melting range between 361 and 421 degrees Fahrenheit or 183 to 238 degrees Celsius. Electronic solder generally falls into one of three types: a lead alloy solder, a lead-free solder, or a silver alloy solder. Lead-based solder is solder that is made from an alloy of tin and lead, sometimes with other materials as well. The reason that lead is combined with tin is that the resulting alloy has a lower melting temperature, an important property of solder when most electronic components are very heat sensitive. Lead alloy solder is often referenced by its alloy ratio, such as 60-40 or 63-37, with the first number being the tin by weight and the second number being the amount of lead by weight. Both of these common alloys are good for common electronics, but 63-37 is a eutectic alloy, which means that it has a sharp transition between liquid and solid states as temperature changes. This property helps reduce cold solder joints that can happen when a part moves as the solder is cooling. Selecting the right solder. Several different features can make selecting the right solder challenging. The right solder needs to take into account the material being soldered, the use of flux, the size of the part being soldered, and the potential health and safety issues of soldering. Solder is available with none, one, or several rosin flux cores running through the center of the solder wire. This embedded rosin flux helps the solder flow and bond to the parts being soldered. However, sometimes the rosin flux that is embedded in the solder is undesirable for a number of reasons, such as the cleaning method that must be used following the soldering, or the presence of a strong acid flux, such as acid flux solder used in plumbing, which should never be used on electronics. And a separate flux is desirable. The three types of rosin core solder are non-activated, R, mildly activated, RMA, and activated, RA, the latter being the most acidic of the three. Solder is also available in a number of diameters, with 0.02 inches, 0.032 inches, 0.063 inches, and 0.04 inches being common solder diameters. Larger diameter solders are great for large solder jobs, tinning larger gauge or multi-strand wires, but make fine work such as surface mount soldering much more difficult. This is where the 0.02 inch and 0.04 inch solder become quite useful. Overall, most work can be done with just a 0.04 diameter solder, especially when combined with a little experience and adequate flux. In front of me, I have three different types of solder. I have 60-40, which has a melting point from 361 to 374 degrees Fahrenheit, or 183 to 190 degrees Celsius. I have a 63-37 solder in two different diameters, which also has a melting point of 361 degrees Fahrenheit, or 183 degrees Celsius. Or I have a non-leaded solder with a higher melting point of 440 degrees Fahrenheit, 227 degrees Celsius. Make sure you check your manufacturer for the exact melting point. And I will also have a diagram of all solder types and their melting temperatures. Please follow along in the next video.